so I'm pleased to be able to introduce our first session. One of the challenges that we have is attracting individuals, youth, as well as scouting families and leaders into scouting. And I don't know of two individuals that are more qualified to do that than Trevor Bender and Matt McIff. And so Trevor and Matt, I'm going to turn the time over to you for this next 55 minutes, and we'll look forward to learning how we can best encourage youth and adults, leaders, families to get back in scouting.
Thanks, Charles, for that introduction. This is a wonderful program, and we're excited to discuss this topic today. We've entitled this topic, Scouting Growth Mindset, Recruiting Leaders and Families in a Post-Pandemic World. A brief overview, we're going to talk about what it means to have a growth mindset and share a story. And then we're going to go through some basics of recruiting and how to sell it. And then another topic is life after Eagle. This was a very interesting and a lot of people were interested in this topic, and then we'll finish with some questions and answers. So I'll go, I'd like to start with a very inspiring story and then turn the time over to Trevor. The reference for this story will be listed below or after this presentation, but it was posted a few years ago by an author on an online journal. Tour boats ferry people out to the USS Arizona Memorial in Hawaii every 30 minutes. We had just missed a ferry and had to wait 30 minutes. I went into a small gift shop to kill time. In the gift shop, I purchased a small book entitled Reflections on Pearl Harbor by Admiral Chester Nimitz. Sunday, December 7th, 1941, Admiral Nimitz was attending a concert in Washington, D.C. He was paged and told there was a phone call for him. When he answered the phone, it was President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He told Admiral Nimitz that he would now be the commander of the Pacific Fleet. Admiral Nimitz flew to Hawaii to assume command of the Pacific Fleet. He landed at Pearl Harbor on Christmas Eve, 1941. There was such a spirit of despair, dejection, and defeat, you would have thought that the Japanese had already won the war. On Christmas Day, 1941, Admiral Nimitz was given a boat tour of the destruction wrought on Pearl Harbor by the Japanese. Big sunken battleships and Navy vessels cluttered the waters everywhere you looked. As the tour boat returned to dock, the young helmsman of the boat asked, "Well, Admiral, what do you think after seeing all this destruction?" Admiral Nimitz's reply shocked everyone within the sound of his voice. Admiral Nimitz said, "The Japanese made 3 of the biggest mistakes an attack force could ever make, or God was taking care of America. Which do you think it was?" Shocked and surprised, the young helmsman asked, "What do you mean by saying the Japanese made the 3 biggest mistakes an attack force has ever made?" Nimitz then explained, "Mistake number 1, Japanese attacked on Sunday morning. 9 out of every 10 crewmen on those ships were ashore on leave. If those same ships had been lured to sea and sunk, we would have lost 38,000 men instead of 3,800. Mistake number 2, when the Japanese saw all those battleships lined in a row, they got so carried away sinking those battleships, they never once bombed our dry docks opposite those ships. If they had destroyed our dry docks, we would have had to tow every one of those ships to America to be repaired. As it is now, the ships are in shallow water and can be raised. One tug can pull them over to the dry docks, and we can have them repaired at sea by the time we could have towed them to America. And I already have crews ashore anxious to man those ships. Mistake number 3. Every drop of fuel in the Pacific theater of war is on top of the ground in storage tanks 5 miles away over that hill. One attack plane could have strafed, strafed those tanks and destroyed our fuel supply. That's why I say the Japanese made 3 of the biggest mistakes an attack force could make, or God was taking care of America.
You know, Matt, that story is interesting in the sense that so much has happened and the attack on Pearl Harbor that is analogous to what scouting is facing today. In fact, you could see a trifecta of major events over the last 2 years that are just impacted membership in scouting. The first, of course, which was all dear to our hearts, is the church's withdrawal of a charter partnership with scouting back on January 1st of 2020. That was followed by a series of events that led to the bankruptcy declaration and a variety of lawsuits targeting scouting. And then lastly, the pandemic and its impact on our youth program and how that's administered at the pack and troop level over the last 18 months. It's just been what you would call the Pearl Harbor equivalent of an attack on scouting. And it seems like right now there's a lot of despair because of that, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of worry, a lot of concern. But there's got to be some bright spots. There's got to be the Chester Nimitz to looking at what scouting has to offer. What are your thoughts on that?
That's right. That's why this story resonated so much with what we're feeling and what many of you are feeling. And may I offer some thoughts like Admiral Nimitz. They might not be as educated as his were. And many of you probably have your own thoughts. But I think it's important to stop focusing on the destruction and focus on where do we go from here. First, I would say we have a wonderful program. Scouting is a program based on principles, and it has survived over 100 years because it is a great program that is designed specifically for youth and to develop character and leadership and all that it's designed to do. It has survived because it is a good program. Number 2, we have a lot of trained leaders and volunteers. When I think of scouting, I think it could be safely said as one of the most effective or the greatest grassroots. It's the ultimate grassroots organization. It is not top heavy, it's bottom heavy. We have everyone who's involved in scouting knows what it's about and the importance of the program. Number 3, we have one of the most recognizable programs in the world. They've studied that the logo, the scouting logo, is one of the most recognized symbols in the world. But finally, I would say the biggest and the most important thing is that we are doing good. And when you are doing good, God will be with you. And I think we need to believe that, and we need to focus on that if we are truly engaged in a great work, helping youth and teaching and guiding and helping them develop and doing good, then God will be with us. You know, it reminds me of a quote that I have hanging on one of our walls in our room, in our house, and it was falsely attributed to C.S. Lewis, but it's by Dr. John Trainer. Children are not a distraction from more important work. They are the most important work. And I really believe that most people here believe that.
Agreed. That reminds me another quote from Theodore Roosevelt: "Far and away the best prize that life has to offer is the chance to work hard and at work worth doing." Working hard at work worth doing. So the joy that comes from service to others and seeing our work benefit others is key to our volunteer work. You know, I am reminded somewhat of an experience I had last weekend. I'm committee chair for Troop 702 in Oceanside, California. And one of our assistant scoutmasters, his name is Sam, had wanted to do a triathlon to help the boys come outside and start getting some fresh air and become more physically active. So he's been planning this for 4 months. In fact, that triathlon's going on right now at the Oceanside Pier. I really wanted to participate in it, but couldn't. This conference was at the same time. There was no way to deconflict. We tried to change the schedule, but it wouldn't work for the kids. But my daughter and I decided to do it a week early. So we went to the pier last Saturday and did the exact route. And the boys happened to be there doing the leg of the cycling portion. And when they found out that my daughter and I were doing the whole thing, a couple of them decided to join with us and do the same thing, to do it in advance. And it was fun because Sam was there practicing with us, and his reaction was pretty cool. At the very end, he said to me and my daughter Audrey, you know, as a volunteer, you don't get paid for what you do. Your payment is seeing the joy in the eyes and in the faces of those who participate. And so when I was thinking about that and the quotes that you just shared, it's a neat, and the joy that we get is when we do the service. That could be in scouting, it could be in church, it could be preparing a Relief Society activity. Who knows what it is, but we put the effort into it, and then that joy comes later. So we mentioned that we have, actually, let me turn it over to you, Matt, for the introduction of the theme.
Okay. Well, thanks for that story. I think we've, many of us have felt this, and especially if it's your own child that you see in the scouting program and the joy that it brings to them. But now turning to the theme, a growth mindset. This is a term that was the title of a book by Carol Dweck several years ago. It's a very good book. I would highly recommend it, called Mindset. And she coined the term and defined it in many ways, but here's a simple definition. In a growth mindset, people believe that their most basic abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. Brains and talent are just the starting point. This view creates a love of learning and a resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. Now, it's hard to summarize an entire book in a quote or a one paragraph, but it suffices to mention it here in this discussion and contrast it with a fixed mindset. A fixed mindset, the opposite of a growth mindset, is the idea that things can't change, that it's a tendency to believe and to act as if certain strengths and abilities are fixed and can't change. It's affected by challenges and setbacks in a way that it engenders disbelief, inflexibility, guardedness, fear, failure of criticism, and unwillingness to change. It creates sort of a boxed-in mentality and engenders discouragement. And as we started with the story of Pearl Harbor, we want to focus now on a growth mindset. And if we adapt this to scouting, how do we describe a scouting growth mindset? Well, scouting leaders and families need to believe that our program can grow through dedication and hard work. We need to believe that the goodness and the utility of the scouting program will change lives. Just like the gospel of Jesus Christ can change lives, so can this program, but it doesn't do it on its own. It takes people. We have to teach. We have to touch other people in a way that the content simply cannot. We can't give up because of the challenges that we are currently facing. There are many out there who may give up if they don't have a leader to help them participate. So with that mindset, we want to focus now on recruiting in its basics, and then talk more about how do we do this.
I love that, Matt. So with this growth mindset, there's a lot we can do as leaders to help make changes for the better. During our presentation today, we're going to have 5 different polling questions. And just to share how this goes, we're going to just have a generic question right now, and we'll pull that up, and it's going to give us some background on what type of organization your unit is chartered by. Many of you are leaders in units, and so just whatever unit you're currently associated with, just describe that. If you're not a leader in a unit, maybe just whatever one you're most closely associated with. Maybe you're a unit commissioner or a grandparent. You help out with your grandchild's troop or pack. Just whatever one you're most closely associated. How is that unit currently chartered? Who is a chartered organization? Is it church, school, business, civic club, nonprofit, or other? Okay, we're looking at 24% by church, 8% school or PTA, 29% civic club, 15% business, 22% nonprofit. Okay, that's actually a greater variety than I would have thought. That's very interesting. I would have thought we would have seen more in the business category, but that's okay. That's fantastic. Any thoughts jump out to you, Matt, on this?
No, I think that's a good distribution.
It really is, which goes to show that if you're thinking about starting a unit, there's lots of options out there. So let's talk about the kind of the situation that we face. We described the Pearl Harbor attack, and as it relates to scouting right now, there is a lot of challenges. As we looked at the recharter process that just completed in 2021, every council saw it. Largely, this is related to the COVID pandemic that we experienced. In Boy Scouts, approximately 20% loss. In Cub Scouts, about a 40% loss, and sometimes even more. And in particular, what's really worrisome is that Cub Scout loss, because it represents a trough, kind of a trough in the growth curve of scouting that will perpetuate itself for the next 5 to 7 years. Most Boy Scouts spent some time in Cub Scouts. That's the normal path of entry into scouting, is through Cub Scouting and then moving forward. And most scout troops rely upon a healthy admission of Cub Scouts bridging over into their unit to continue for longevity. So that's an issue that we're facing. It's tough. And so as you think about the presentation we're having today on ideas for recruiting, especially be mindful of how you might be able to apply those in Cub Scouting situations. Because we no longer have this, and for many of us who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there was this automatic recruiting path in the scout troop where boys would just bridge over. Almost every single one would come over from scouts, Cub Scouts into the troop. That's no longer the case. And so we need to be recruiting both on the troop level and the pack level, but especially this year on that pack level. All right, so I think we can bring up our next slide. Here's some recruiting basics. Scouting is fun, scouting is adventure, scouting is friends, scouting is accomplishments. There's all these fun things that we can do. This particular shot is of the Scoutmaster of Troop 702, his daughter. We were at Camp Mattagway back in November doing a family camp out. We got a chance to get out on the canoes. It was the first time those canoes have been used, I think, in about 6 months. It was so fun to pull them out of the shed behind there and clean them up and get them out on the lake. Let's remind people about how much fun scouting is and how it's outdoors. You're going to see a lot of messaging this year about being outdoors from BSA. And that's because we have been cooped up. It's time to get it back out to our summer camps or wherever else, on the rivers, out in the water, and have a lot of fun. So let's remind our youth about that. Now, the key thing about scouting is you need to have a plan in doing the recruiting efforts. On our next slide here, we'll talk about some of those ideas of recruiting. But essentially, if you don't have a plan, it probably won't get done. Everything needs to be written down and actions given and so forth. So it's best to, let's go ahead and do this audience poll. It's a good time to do this. Does your scouting unit have a written recruiting plan? Yes, no, unsure. I did not even know these plans existed. Okay, I am pleasantly surprised. 30% says their scout does have a written recruiting plan. And about a third don't have a plan, and a third are unsure. Okay, all right, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. In fact, part of what I do is I'm an assistant council commissioner with San Diego Imperial Council, and my role is membership. So I'm focused heavily on these issues. And we're launching an initiative right now to ensure that every unit has the opportunity to create a written plan. We created a 3-page script or template, I guess you could call it, a template that each unit, either Cub or Troop or other, could complete that and define ways to recruit, with the idea being that we should be recruiting all the time. It's not just an annual thing tied to maybe open house at school or whatnot. So as you see on this slide, be prepared, have an annual plan, create a membership team. We'll talk about that next. And you'll see have a plan reinforced multiple times there. And have accountable and assigned leaders and involve the entire unit. Okay, we'll move on to the next slide and talk a little bit more about that recruitment team. Here we see a troop committee meeting, and they're talking about planning for the troop. And each in the guide and the idea of a recruitment squad, it should always be led by someone assigned by the committee. So you should have a recruitment squad team leader. It could be your new member coordinator, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It could be somebody else. You'll want to involve your unit commissioner and the scout leader and assistants. There should be somebody in charge of communications who helps get the word out. The chartered org rep should be involved with their contacts that they have. And of course, the scouts and the parents play a role too. So the next few slides, we're going to talk about some best practices in recruiting and when that might occur, some things to think about, and why it's important to all of us. And Matt, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Trevor. I think that message is loud and clear. You need a plan and you need a team. That's simple. Now we talk about when do you recruit? Scheduling is really important. You don't want it, even if you have a plan and a team, you need to do it annually and make it a recurring action if you want it to succeed. Well, the start of the school year is a very natural time. The start of the school year is the start of the scout calendar, and that's when youth are choosing activities, looking for activities in their new school year. So that's a great time to have a join night or to start recruiting. Spring crossover is another good time if you have an affiliated pack. That just makes a lot of sense, and work closely with your pack to make that happen. And then year-round activities, these depend on the activity, but the point is to choose these activities where it would make sense and prepare for it. You can see this picture of this troop that has a trifold, desktop display, and they're ready, they're prepared. Which that brings me to the next slide. Once you have a plan and a team, you've got to be ready when people show interest. You've got to be ready to welcome the new scouts. Having your location updated on the beascout.org, the pin on the map, create a hashtag or a QR code, a new member welcome kit with a new member coordinator, a join night coordinator. You might even organize a join night with another troop or coordinate efforts. You can really make things more effective the more people you have involved. And of course, any other digital media links and pages, make sure they're updated and they're not, the link doesn't go anywhere. And we'll talk more about digital resources later, but that's extremely important to have everything up to date. Now let's talk about the new member kit and the new member coordinator.
Hey, thanks, Matt. Yeah, thank you. So one item I wanted to bring up is the fact that, as I mentioned earlier about the numbers of decreases in the January 21 recharter. May 1st was a key date. That was kind of the drop dead date when you kind of re-baselined all your council numbers and where we stood. And a number of units you probably have seen across the country have chosen not to recharter until they saw the COVID situation end. The country seems to be coming out of that now. Certain states are ahead of others. And it was interesting in my own San Diego experience, we had, like 60 units drop total. And saw already since May 1st, once we hit that deadline, things started opening up. We've had 12 returned again. So just because a unit failed to recharter or a family chose not to sign up again for scouts doesn't mean that they were making a permanent decision. They were back in the mindset of November, December. Remember how we all felt back then during the country? How was feeling? Many of them want to come back. So that's kind of the low-hanging fruit. Reach back to those who didn't sign up again, didn't recharter, and invite them to come back either as individuals or wholesale units. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the role of the new member coordinator and what their purposes are to do. And we'll start this by having a poll. Does the scouting unit that you are most closely associated with have a new member coordinator? Yes, no answer, unsure, or I've never even heard about that role before. Okay, 30% have a new member coordinator. That's fantastic. And it's about an equal, almost a similar split to the one we saw before. So thank you very much for that information. Appreciate that. So the new member coordinator is much like the church greeter that we're so familiar with, somebody who's there to welcome folks to our church meetings. And they are ones who would prepare that welcome kit that we just saw the slide for. And they would make sure that the new families who are coming in and the new scouts feel totally welcome. There's a unique uniform that the new member coordinator wears. It's a red shirt that's kind of like polo style, doesn't look like a Boy Scout uniform. And the idea is they should be easily recognizable at unit events so that they can be the one that is the face of the unit for people who maybe don't have any experience at all in scouting. They can come in and feel warmth right off the bat, know they can go to ask safe questions, and not be intimidated perhaps by uniforms or whatnot if they don't know anything about scouting. So encourage you, if you don't have a new member coordinator, to look into it. There's a ton of training on BSA about the role of new member coordinators and the benefit they provide to units and how they can encourage participation and show that spirit of joy and enthusiasm right from the beginning.
You know, Trevor, if I could interject, I think this is a really important role, and it takes the right spirit or the right person to do it. I went to a court of honor a month or two ago for another troop, and so I was new, and no one recognized. You know, I didn't recognize everyone, but the scoutmaster's wife came up to me and welcomed me because she saw that I was new, and it was just a small touch, but it was very effective. She was so nice and welcoming, and it's exactly what we're talking about.
Thank you. So I think we're up for another poll. You want to lead this one for us, Matt?
Yeah. So now moving on, which of the following recruiting best practices has your scouting unit participated during the last year? Good. So interesting, 75% is friend to friend, scouts to invite their friends to participate, which that's a high quality recruitment effort, right? Friend to friend, scout to scout, yard signs, or an event. Very, very good. So that brings us to this next topic. And that next slide there, Mike, what are the different methods and the best practices for recruiting? You know, Trevor used the term low-hanging fruit. We could probably apply that to a lot of different things. Former scouts that just lost a troop is probably low-hanging fruit. I think low-hanging fruit is just setting up a sign, setting up a yard sign, or handing out flyers or posting something somewhere. To me is low-hanging fruit because you didn't do anything else. All you did was post something and they call you. So it makes me think, why would you not go after the low-hanging fruit where all you have to do is hang something up and they give you a call? So make sure you don't miss the low-hanging fruit with banners, yard signs, and then there are other really good activities, parades, book fairs, and then of course the scout to scout, the buddy cards. It might help the scout to scout if they have a card to give rather than just talking about it, because then it's something tangible and it's a reminder and it has information on there. We say scout to scout, but it's also could be parent to parent. And I think this is one thing that's not always recognized. Part of recruiting the scouting is recruiting the parents. Do the parents believe in this program? And if they do, a parent to parent is a great high quality way to recruit. And then of course, some more modern ways, a sticker, a QR code on your car or somewhere else. There are lots of creative ways that we can use to get the word out. But I think that the overarching principle is you got to be visible. So many times when we've been out in the community, either with a service project or fundraising, so many people came up to us and said, we're just glad to see you out here. We're just glad to see that you're still around. And every different iteration of that phrase We've heard it quite often in our community, and I think that's the point. You got to be visible.
Yeah, that's fantastic, Matt. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, lastly, I want to put a plug in for our councils, right? Our council has resources. Our council will print, well, at least our council, I assume most councils are very similar, where they have the option of printing materials for you using the logo and using your information. Please check out your council's websites because they are begging people to use them. So I'll put a plug in for that as well.
You know, Matt, the ideas you gave were fantastic. And one of the things that BSA has been able to do is learn about where is the highest recruiting success. And it's very much, as you said, those personal relationships, parents to parents, scout to friend at school or friend on the sports team and inviting them in. We're seeing here, there's a brand central. This slide is talking about the brand center where you can get from BSA tons of information. Don't have to be all creative yourself. You can go and get a lot of content. In fact, some of the information you saw in our videos that we showed both yesterday and today, we got from the brand center. Just a lot of high quality material there. It's all free for us to use in the recruiting efforts for BSA. So I mentioned about personal relationships. Don't forget about siblings too. As you have a family participating in scouting, don't assume it's just automatic that just because Charlie becomes an Eagle that his younger brother or sister will want to participate in scouting or automatically. That's just not something you can assume. So make sure those younger siblings are invited, do family events where the younger kids can come and see their older brothers or sisters in uniform and will have a desire to participate. And then finally, just like in the church, those who are most successful in recruiting are those who join within the last 6 months. Now you think about someone who's has a great baptismal service. They're totally excited. They're talking with everybody about this life choice they just made. And they're often very successful in bringing others into the gospel. Similarly with scouting, the most successful are those who just recently joined. And so as a new member coordinator, as a committee chair, somebody who's in charge of that team of recruiting, don't forget to ask those just very gently. Hey, you're having a good time. You've been here a couple months. Is there anyone else that you think would be interested in joining with you in your circle of friends? Sometimes those gentle prompts like that can bring others to think about, yeah, I would like to have so-and-so come and join us. So, some good things to think about there. Matt, what are some other ways that we can sell scouting?
Well, yeah, this is great. I just happened to glance over the chat and someone said, it's moms. You got to get the moms on board, right?
That's so true.
And I would agree with that. Moms are so important. And in fact, we're going to talk more about that. We have an article about recently a message to moms, which I want to talk more about another day, but we need to talk about how to talk about it, how to sell it, how to sell scouting. And I think the way you talk about it is important. Whether you're talking to the moms or the dads or the youth, the scouts, you can't say the same things, because if you were to go up to a scout and say, you know what, how would you like to be in a character developing spiritual program? Well, that might not go over as well as talking about the fun that you have in scouting. Let's be honest. Youth are looking for fun activities. Parents are looking for fun activities that show development and character development. So how you talk about it is important. I think with youth especially, the burden of proof is on us. They want something fun and they want you to prove it. They don't always believe you, especially in the past. If they've been in units that didn't always function the way they thought it would be, you have to prove it first, and then the youth will believe you. So that's why I like to say adventure comes first. Scouting is about adventure, and that's what will be attractive to the youth, is the adventure. The stuff that comes along with it is what the parents want. They want the service and the character development and leadership and the spiritual moment. And as leaders too, we often get like that too. We can't wait for that spiritual moment around the campfire, because we know that could be life-changing. But you can't start with that. You have to start with the adventure and the fun, and And
You know, Matt, and for 107 years, the Scouting and the Church were linked together. And even today, for those of us who are still in both programs, there is a fantastic connection between Scouting and what the goals that we provide in Scouting and how that can link back into the new church program on children and youth in the areas of, spiritual, intellectual, physical, and emotional. Those are all great goal areas, and many of our Scout goals will fit into those as well, as we've seen over the last year and a half. So, but you're right, it's the high adventure we want to sell first, the fun and the
that's
friends.
right. But you're right. This is going to be, we've always known that Scouting is a well-balanced program, and it does coordinate very well with the new curriculum with the Church of Jesus Christ, the youth curriculum. It complements it, and we don't want it to compete, but complement. And then when you look at all the activities that are available, there's a large burden of choice. That's one thing I would say about parents. They have a choice of what to involve their youth in. And we hope to really be an attractive choice, but we have to prove that. So, okay. Then when you've got Scouts that have achieved Eagle, then what?
Oh my goodness. So for many, the mindset has been, once I've achieved Eagle, I'm done. I can relax, I can focus more on high school, I can, whatever that is, sports. But there is still so much left to do in Scouting after Eagle. And so we want to share with you as parents and leaders some of these ideas that you can share with your youth who are probably at a decision point along those lines of ways they can continue in Scouting. So first off, the big one is just focus more adventures outdoors. There's more of the Pacific Crest Trail to do. There's more of high adventure that can be done, especially if somebody achieves Eagle at an early age. Sometimes we'd see them at 13 and 14. Although the average age nationally, both inside and outside the church, for Eagle is 17 years and 10 months. Many achieve it much earlier. And so, especially for those, what else can they do? So we talked about high adventure. I reminded of the quote last night when we shared the video where Lord Baden-Powell made the comment about how it's don't focus on the technique, focus on the moral. And I believe what he was referring to is when you get outdoors, it's that outdoor setting where you can have that moral, have the greater impact and impression upon the youth. Don't be worried so much if they're not starting their fire correctly or if they're tying the knot incorrectly.
Yeah, don't get caught up in the steps, right?
Yes, exactly.
Because getting in the outdoors is where they learn, and it's where the adventure is. And in fact, I'd like to highlight one of my favorite things. It's called the Outdoor Adventure Award. And again, the steps are simple, but it's mostly more outdoor experience. It looks like this. The Outdoor Adventure Award, and it's a pentagon because you earn several arms of it. This one is the camping arm of it. And as you earn different factors that are, parts of this award, you can encourage participation and more adventure. And it plays to their strengths, because if they're interested in aquatics or biking or horses, or, you can really maximize their interest and add achievement, but it's more about keep adventuring. And then what else did you mention? Leadership?
Okay, yeah. So let me jump into that. Thanks, Matt. So there's several courses that one can participate in that are more senior for Scouting. One is National Youth Leadership Training, NYLT, and then a follow-on course to that is National Advanced Youth Leadership Experience, NAIL. In addition, an Eagle Scout could become a troop guide or a junior assistant scoutmaster. Following our presentation today, you're going to have a chance to hear from Brad Harris. I met Brad initially when he first came out to San Diego in 2015 for a little Philmont that we did at Camp Matagway. I remember he impressed upon me the importance of NYLT, especially in preparing youth to serve missions, because it's a leadership training course. And as you know, as a missionary, when you're out there for 18 months to 2 years, part of your responsibility is to lead other missionaries, and sometimes in trying times. And so as a result, both of my sons are Eagle Scouts, but I heavily encouraged my younger boy to go to NYLT, and he did. And when he came back and we talked about it, over the next year and a half or so, he would bring up points that reminded me of Wood Badge. I was so shocked. All this leadership training that he had received. And I remember Brad emphasizing heavily that when those kids who have completed MYLT show up at the Missionary Training Center, they stand out as leaders who are confident and know the things that need to occur. So I would highly encourage that. I think, Matt, you're coming up. You and your boys are going to NAIL. Is that correct?
That's right. This summer, Philmont. We're looking forward to it. There's so many opportunities, and your council and district will have other opportunities, maybe a camp counselor or Order of the Arrow. Not to mention venturing and Sea Scouting. I don't know if you mentioned that earlier, but there are other programs that may or may not be available in your area. But there are other things to do. And then I neglected to mention some other awards within Scouting, like the 50-miler, mile swim, conservation award. There are so many things that the awards just give you a structure. But if you can get the boys or the youth, boys and girls, if you can get them interested in a particular topic, then the structure is there. But the structure is not there for its own purpose. It's for the youth. But if they get to know about it, then you might pique their interest.
And they may also want to do something slightly different than the traditional troop model. They could go to Order of Arrow, be focused in groups there. Venturing programs, Sea Scouting, exploring, all those are options too.
Yep. But now, Trevor, let's say that a scout or a youth or a family is a little bit behind or disillusioned or, not wanting to finish the Eagle. Could we, instead of life after Eagle, is it possible to have life instead of Eagle?
Okay. I suppose that would be the case. Are you referring to the missions of Scouting?
Yeah, I want to address this briefly, that sometimes, again, like you mentioned earlier, we get caught up in the steps. And there have been times where I've spoken to families and said, well, the Eagle Award, though notable as it is not the mission of Scouting. It is not the reason why we do it. It is simply a method. And so this is a great discussion to have with parents or other people when you talk about Scouting, is remind them what the mission of Scouting is. What are the aims and the missions and the methods? So if you can't recite those immediately, I encourage you to look at it. But the mission of Scouting, right, is to help youth make ethical and moral choices throughout their lifetime, right? So anyway, we don't have to go into that completely, but advancement is just one of the methods. And when I remind people of that, it brings the purpose back into focus. And just like our meeting last night, what is the focus? What is the center? And that is to help youth make ethical and moral choices. And from a religious perspective, bring them to Christ or bring them to faith in God. And everything is around in the circle of that. So
that's great, Matt. In fact, I saw a lot of items of folks chiming in on chat about how Eagle is not, you don't have to earn the Eagle. There's a lot of benefits of Scouting beyond that. So you don't have to, that doesn't just necessarily make you the better person. It is a great goal to achieve and a fantastic accomplishment, but there's so many other benefits too. I think we had one last polling question. Maybe bring that up now.
Let's do it. About life after Eagle. Which of these life after Eagle activities have you seen Scouts participate in? All right, interesting spread. 54% NYLT or NAIL, 56%. So this is multiple choice, right? They can choose more than one. Right. Troop Guide, 56%, 79% earning additional Eagle Palms. Fantastic. 8% the Outdoor Achievement Award. Well, I hope to increase that. I hope to increase that percentage. This is a really cool award. In fact, if you earn all 5 or 6 sides, or if you earn, I'm not going to go into it, but if you get the whole award, you get a medal. And it's probably the most difficult award in Scouting. So there, the gauntlet has been thrown. If you want to earn the most difficult award in Scouting, earn the complete Outdoor Achievement Award. And then 48% venturing or sea scouting. That's fantastic. Very good. All right, Trevor, we'll probably have to get some questions pretty soon, but we have one final word on commitment, or should we save this to the end?
I think maybe you take a couple of questions.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So I've got one. Which churches are supporting Vanguard units?
Well, there are no Vanguard units, right? Vanguard, our association is to help support families in scouting and support units, but they don't sponsor units by themselves. As we mentioned earlier, there are other methods or other organizations that will help sponsor or charter units.
Perfect.
And I think that's what the question is really about, is as units that were formally chartered by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are looking for a new home, if you will, a new chartering organization. When we asked a question earlier about, who's now sponsoring or chartering your particular unit, there were a couple of answers about churches. And so I think somebody's interested to know what other churches might be helping to sponsor units that were formally chartered by our church.
I suppose that could be a variety of any of them. It's interesting how many different charters there were there.
Yeah, I see in the chat lots of our friends from other faiths are on here today, and Catholic and Methodist, or they're all popping up in the chat. I see, so all willing to welcome families into their programs. This is more of kind of just a discussion point of how many people are using their district membership chairs to look at the Be a Scout leads and invitation manager and to work on contacting those leads. Trevor, Matt, I don't know if we're doing that.
Yeah, so in San Diego, that's a very timely topic. And what we're seeing is not everybody is trained in following up on those leads. And so sometimes at the council level, we have to remind them at the district level, hey, don't forget about these leads or these applications that are in process. If you let them sit there stale too long, you lose somebody who's reaching out to join. They don't even know anything about your unit, but they want to join because it's close by. So make sure to act on those very quickly.
Yeah, and give me just a few minutes when I get off of the chat feature here. I will put in the chat some tutorials of how to check your invitation manager, how to follow up on those leads, and then how to close those leads out. So
perfect, thank you.
Tutorial for you.
Well, Matt, so we've talked a lot about things here tonight or today, this morning. It's a lot to think about, it's a lot to do. And sometimes you might think, do I really want to commit to this?
Right. So let's talk about commitment. And I not only, well, those of you who are here today are committed to some degree. And I want to recognize that. This being here on a Saturday morning demonstrates commitment, and our past experiences show commitment. But what I want to focus on is how that commitment, and as that commitment is strengthened, how it attracts success. And there's a very good quote. It's a long quote, but it's a very good one by a German statesman. Many of you may have seen this before. Johann Wolfgang von Goethe wrote this quote on commitment, where he says, "Until one is committed, there's always hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans. That the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. All sorts of things occur to help one that would never otherwise have occurred. A whole stream of events issues from the decision, raising to one's favor all manner of unforeseen incidents and meetings, and material assistance which no one could have dreamed would come her way. Whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it." Again, this is one of my favorite quotes. And what it means to me is that when you commit, all sorts of things start to happen that you did not foresee. And I felt that way in our troop that we started a year and a half ago. Once people knew and could see our commitment, people would call us or find us, or in other ways join, and we've had success with that. But I think besides all the program and the people, it's the level of commitment that is the magic.
You know, Matt, that reminds me of a scripture that is so powerful for those of us in the church in Doctrine and Covenants 58:26 through 28, which we'll be studying starting tomorrow in the Come Follow Me program. Let me just share those 3 verses real quick. For behold, it is not meet that I should command in all things, for he that is compelled in all things, the same is a slothful and not a wise servant, wherefore he receiveth no reward. Verily I say, men should be anxiously engaged in a good cause, and do many things of their own free will, and bring to pass much righteousness. For the power is in them, wherein they are agents unto themselves, and inasmuch as men do good, they shall in no wise lose their reward. Both Vanguard and Scouting are good causes, and we can be anxiously engaged in those causes to do good things. I'm reminded of Rex Tillerson's story last night of the scoutmaster who was cleaning up the boys when they had their food explode all over them at the campfire mishap. And the boy said, "Oh, how much are you paid to do this?" And he says, "You can't pay me enough, and you can't volunteer for it. You're put here." Each of us on this call was put here for a purpose. It's up to us to commit to do that purpose to make a difference in the lives around us.
Yep, so true. All right, well, this has been a really great topic, and I'm sure it's generating a lot of discussion. I don't know if we have any more questions to answer, Wendy, or if we should.
Yeah, one more. Any ideas on how to help fund families that can't afford scouting?
They can't afford it?
Yes.
I guess the best thing to do is let that word get out gently to the committee of the troop. Usually there are those who are willing to open their pocketbooks to help out those who are less fortunate. Vanguard itself has given away multiple scholarships over the last 3 or 4 months. When I say scholarships, these are camperships for people to be able to attend, $500-$600 camp. So there are ways to do that. They just get the word out and do so privately, discreetly.
I agree. The Scout Committee can really do that sometimes on a very private or inconspicuous manner.
Yeah, and in the chat, people are responding, with some of the fundraisers. Once that scout is in, it's always nice for them to feel like they're giving back as well, so they can participate in those fundraisers.
Yep. All right. Well, again, thank you so much for your participation. I thought the polling feature went very well, and we wish you the best in your recruiting efforts in your units and your districts. Charles, thank you so much.
Thanks, Trevor and Matt, and thank you all for the wonderful comments. I've loved watching the comments. Some wonderful ideas out there. I love the comment about the funding for those who are not able to afford scouting. Normally scouting is not a cost issue. We spend a lot more money in dance and some of those other issues, but in some parts of the country and in some families, it becomes a very significant issue, and that's the majesty of the council or of the troop committee. And we're going to get to that in just a few minutes when we get to Brad Harris talking about the blessings of the entire program of scouting.